When Evil Dead Burn first started, I was definitely on board. It has a good gory opening that genuinely made me wince, and I was interested in the main characters at first. The humor at the beginning also works, integrated into the film through some well-done editing, creating something funny but dark and mean-spirited. The purposefully kind of choppy editing was going along with the musical score, so I thought this was working during the movie's beginning, and I also felt that this section effectively built tension. So it was overall dramatic, created a tone that worked, and was held together by these technical elements. However, I think as the movie went on, all these aspects fell off. I wasn't really granted the supernatural, gnarly deaths that I go to an Evil Dead movie for. It has that iconic Evil Dead POV motion camera, but this aspect and the movie overall feels like it's a failing imitation of the qualities displayed in the franchise's films that came before it. It also uses that familiar beat of putting a barrier between the Deadites and the hunted characters, so at this point I'm kind of noticing some of the sameness and I guess some of the formulaic nature that this franchise has taken on. I think I wouldn't have a problem with this in Evil Dead Burn if I enjoyed other aspects like the kills and the visual style more than I did. It's also taking the idea of the Deadites showing or telling the characters what they know will upset them most, and I think on paper and in the other Evil Dead movies this is an effective quality for horror villains, but due to the characters' lack of depth and my lack of connection with them, the Deadites taunting and the threat of them wasn't effective for me in this installment. Burn does offer up a couple of new iterations on the Deadite idea, including one particular scene that I found pretty good and disturbing. But again, since I had problems with other aspects of the movie, it blunts the appreciation that I could have for the good moments. Continuing on the Deadite front, one thing I disliked was how they had this mission to find an item, rather than simply sadistically messing with the characters. I found that motivation and the tint it cast over the Deadites strange, and personally that really didn't work for me. Did anybody else feel like the violence was not front and center here? What I'm thinking is, during what is traditionally the most exciting part of a horror movie, I feel Burn's editing and cinematography style stopped being an effective way to showcase its events. I feel like the violence wasn't extravagant overall, and often the camera didn't hold on the violent moments long enough to actually give them impact. And I think maybe the cinematography style of the camera swinging around also blunted the impact of the violence. I think evisceration and mutilation are used to good effect a couple of times, but otherwise I found the violence and other kills to be lacking. So I really don't understand this inconsistency. At a certain point I was grasping for interesting set pieces, but they weren't there. Besides the technical problems that I had with these scenes overall, the characters set up in the beginning to seem like they could possibly be interesting are never more fully developed. I assumed they would be as the movie went on, but that didn't end up being the case. So since I found them shallow, I was never emotionally connected to or invested in the characters. And this meant that the violent scenes were really lacking effectiveness to me, and the movie lost its sense of tension. I also really didn't care for the emotional conceit at the film's thematic center. So there isn't good writing, and there isn't consistently well executed gore, and I think you need one of those things to be successful in a horror movie. I also thought the ending, like the final confrontation, was dumb. The post-credit scene was good though. I really didn't like the setting of the house, and once they got there, the color grading was awful, and it was actually straining my eyes at a certain point. So I really can't believe that somebody signed off on that muted, gross color palette that's present for so much of the movie. Now, I want to get into the movie's tone. I think the spirit of Evil Dead movies are fun, and they have a tonal sense of humor running through them. But Burn is trying to go for seriousness and darkness at times, and it just falls flat because the characters aren't developed. At the beginning, like I mentioned, I did feel like it was tonally balanced with these things. Like there would be darkness alongside funny or mean-spirited moments, well executed with the editing. But at a certain point, this tonal balance just falls apart. Burn continues to try to be serious, but at the same time starts sprinkling in these badly executed jokes. Some do consider this movie to be overall mean-spirited, and I can see it trying to go for that, but the serious tonal vessel that it uses to try and accomplish it just doesn't work for me. Sometimes I can really have fun with certain mean-spirited movies, because ones that use that register are often clever. So with things like that, I can personally go along with the story and occasionally laugh in disbelief at what's happening. Like, if I found the deaths to be particularly effective, they could carry that feeling and create a sense of fun. But I didn't feel this, and I didn't find this movie to be clever. I found it to be an unenjoyable slog. You can be mean-spirited and fun, and this movie is neither. And the meanness didn't hold actual weight because I wasn't invested in the characters. And also, I think if this movie wasn't supposed to be fun or have a good sense of humor about itself, which, by the way, is kind of weird for an Evil Dead movie because they usually include a sense of fun, excitement, and a propulsive nature. But anyway, okay, even if it wasn't supposed to be fun, and meanness was the only goal, then they should have gone meaner. And maybe then I would have liked the movie more. But also, it's confusing because I feel like they're trying to still have fun in there because there's the dumb jokes. And like, yeah, I mentioned earlier that the film's humor in the beginning works well through the editing, but as it goes on, it stops working. The humor just becomes clunky, and it's not balanced anymore with the film's otherwise attempted serious tone. My main problem with this is mostly attributed to the grandma character, because the humor mechanism in the movie switches from the editing to her dialogue. And her lines and the attempted humor with her did not work at all for me. I found it to be dumb, cringeworthy, and badly executed. Going along with tone, some have cited this movie in conjunction with New French extremism or misery and torture films. So I have limited knowledge on New French extremism films. I know obviously there's going to be some clunkers in there, but the ones that I like are Inside and Martyrs. I feel like those are generally considered to be the best ones, and those movies have interesting and compelling characters and well-written emotional conceits, and I didn't find these qualities in Evil Dead Burn. You may think it's unfair to compare Evil Dead Burn with those movies, but if it's inspired by those things, I personally think it's fair to see where it measures up. If it's going to invoke those things, then I'm obviously going to compare them. So I didn't find interesting and compelling characters or well-written emotional conceits in Evil Dead Burn. I think a movie should either be fun or have good characters and be compelling and interesting in the plot. New French extremism, from what I understand, operates in a tone of heightened reality, and torture films are also based in reality. Evil Dead is supernatural. So, in my opinion, I think a big part of Evil Dead Burn's tone not working is the torture style and attempted seriousness of New French extremity mashed together with supernatural Deadites. To me, these things don't work together. On the topic of color grading, Inside and Martyrs, for example, use stark colors that are effective for their subject matter. Torture films like Hostel, or like misery films like Funny Games, use stylistic or realistic color grading that works along with and enhances their content. Evil Dead Burn is aggressively gray and ugly. So before I get into my Evil Dead Reboot ranking, leave a comment and let me know your thoughts on this new installment, and if you agree or disagree with me. I decided to rank only the reboots because those are what I've seen recently, and I've only watched some of the TV show. I stopped watching it because I heard that it left off on an unsatisfying note because of the cancellation, so I haven't returned to it even though I do think that it's good. Number 3 in my ranking is probably not a surprise. It's Evil Dead Burn. And I think I should have known I would have problems with this one after not enjoying the director's first feature, but I wanted to have hope. And yeah, part of the reason I had hope was because of the producers on Evil Dead Burn. and also because I enjoyed my number 2 choice, Lee Cronin's Evil Dead Rise, in theaters when that came out. So I thought it was on a good trajectory. But yeah, I think Evil Dead Rise is pretty fun. It had good cinematography, and here Lee Cronin started his love affair with split diopter shots, but he's much more restrained with them here than he is in The Mummy. I prefer the fun, over-the-top style cinematography and editing that he grew into in The Mummy, but yeah, Evil Dead Rise is enjoyable. I like the color grading as it incorporates some bright reds and blues. The story and script aren't bad and have some good setups and payoffs, some good character relationships, and a good finale. Alyssa Sutherland is great, and the line "Mommy's with the maggots now" is iconic. What will be. My number 1 is, of course, Evil Dead 2013. This is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. The characters are interesting and have interesting relationships with each other, and not only does this movie have the basis of well-written characters and a good premise, but it delivers on the violence, and builds it up with great pacing over time to an awesome finale. It uses effectively stark coloring and interesting camera work, and I find what the Deadites do in this installment to be particularly effective, and the characters are compelling to follow over the course of a propulsive and exciting story. Many horror movies carry the promise of catharsis, and this one delivers all I want and more. We're gonna get you, not another beat. Time to go to sleep. So, given that Evil Dead 2013 is one of the best horror movies ever, I like Rise well enough, and I like Evil Dead 1 and 2, and I like Army of Darkness well enough, I enjoy what I had known of this franchise and wanted to carry that feeling to this new installment. Unfortunately, I left very disappointed. The future of this franchise is going into the past with a prequel set in 1972. It's titled Evil Dead Wrath, set to release in 2028, and directed by Francis Galuppi. I haven't seen Galuppi's film Last Stop in Yuma County, so I can't really speak to my expectations on Wrath, but I hope that it's better than Burn. Leave a comment with your Evil Dead ranking. It could be only the reboots like I did, or you could include all of them. Like the video, subscribe, and check out these uploads for more, and I'll see you next time. Bye!